Industrial economics teaches that there are four major requirements for production: land, labor, capital, and raw materials. While knowledge, the fifth commodity, was always a factor, it was always considered secondary in the world of bureaucratic business structures. There was a set way of building a company, and it was assumed you knew that before embarking. However, knowledge, as the internet has shown us again and again, is in fact the ultimate commodity because it proportionally reduces the need for the other four. The more knowledge you have access to and the more innovatively you use it, the less your overhead. Case in point, Amazon.com. In one fell swoop, Jeff Bezos, founder and CEO of Amazon.com, created the world's largest, most flexible, and cheapest bookstore. Its day-to-day operation requires no land, little labor, little capital, and absolutely no raw materials. He did this by linking the inventory databases to storehouses of knowledge of the two largest book suppliers to a dynamic website, interactive access to knowledge. No bricks, no mortar, no blue-collar labor, little overhead. The result to the consumer? The most convenient and cheapest bookstore in the world, tailored to your reading taste. The result to Bezos? Amazon's market capitalization is currently over $9 billion. More than just a brilliant entrepreneur, Jeff Bezos represents the pinnacle organizing unit of the information age, an individual and his knowledge, the connected producer. In the industrial age, a company's driving goal was mass production. Indeed, one of the primary icons associated with the industrial age is the assembly line, the ultimate tool of mass production and the heartbeat of a well-structured industrial corporation. Industrial economist Adam Smith was one of the fiercest proponents of hierarchical corporate structure. Just as raw materials were considered expendable commodities, so was labor. In order to make an industrial company go, blue-collar labor was required to fill mechanical roles. Jobs such as hauling, inventory tracking, and inspection were strictly defined by a set of associated responsibilities. Since laborers were typically trained by the company, individual qualifications mattered little, only a willingness to devote yourself to the company as much as possible for as long as possible. Advancements within the organization was granted to those who worked the longest and the hardest rather than the best. Consistent corporate obedience was labeled company loyalty and potentially rewarded with a move up the corporate ladder. Any deviation from the cookie-cutter description of your job was considered counterproductive and punishable. A popular term for such deviance was making waves. Your job under the industrial model was to simply do things right. It was up to the manager above you to decide what those things were. The most crippling feature of such heavy-handed corporate bureaucracy is its extremely limited adaptability. If every decision has to be approved from the top and passed down from tier to tier, a corporation can only adapt as fast as its managers can make the necessary decisions. What happens when the problems change faster than the decisions which apply to them? Your bureaucracy is forced to collapse on itself. This is the paradox that makes today's major industrial powers cringe. The organizational hierarchy typical of industrial companies is far too slow to adapt to the constant and infinitely varied feedback of its wired associates. Real-time market analysis requires real-time adaptation to be useful. Real-time adaptation requires a corporate structure that is modular, specialized, thin, and nimble. Your organizational hierarchy is replaced by a corporate web. In the corporate web, every employee becomes a manager in themselves. You are not just responsible for doing your job, you are responsible for making the company as a whole run more efficiently. The mantra changes from do things right to do the right things. In an industrial bureaucracy, still the most common corporate structure, an employee that interacted directly with the customer was quite low on the chain of command. An example would be a call center operator. These employees were managed by supervisors who were in turn managed by regional managers who were in turn governed by the company's executive body. The executive staff had its own hierarchy, vice president, president, CEO, and so on. All major decisions were considered executive decisions and were not acted upon until an appropriate member of the executive body decided on an approach. The lower you were on the chain of command, the less decision-making control you had. Ironically, the people with the least control were the ones that interacted with the customer the least as well. In the information-driven corporate web, every employee becomes, as consultant Tom Peters puts it, a business unit of one. Kevin Kelly, the executive editor of Wired magazine, describes the corporation of the future as a complex, adaptive network of producers. Rather than working for abstract, indirect values such as company loyalty, you work for concrete, direct value, such as enhanced skills, new business contacts, and a measurable economic return. Employees shift from being commodities to being necessities. As Tom Peters puts it, if you cannot say what concrete value you add to your company, you should either quit or be fired. Rather than somebody above you making you valuable, it becomes your individual responsibility to make yourself valuable. You do this by instantiating yourself into a company's business process. For example, a programmer who works an 80-hour work week is obviously dedicated, but if a competing programmer solves the same problem in 20 hours, he is just as obviously more valuable to the company. The first programmer might do things right, but the second programmer does the right things. You empower yourself by solving problems using your own initiative, experience, and resources. In the corporate web, a producer's value is directly related to their skill rather than their title. Therefore, it is in a producer's best interest to continuously improve, learn, and adapt. When job security depends only on the value you carry, the appropriate perception is that your employer is your customer. In a world without abstract security, everyone becomes a subcontractor. However, your employer is also your vendor simultaneously, since they offer you a forum for expanding your skills and personal resources. Concepts of internal employees versus external ones don't apply. In the information age, we all produce constantly in cooperation for one simple reason: to make ourselves more valuable as business units of one.